I've spent 3 years pouring my heart into a garden that was supposed to be my escape, my therapy, my little patch of peace. Now these strangers want me to gift them not just my expensive planters, but also my labor, my sweat, my artistic vision. When I refused, they threatened to kill my dream of moving into my first real home. The worst part? People actually think I'm the villain in this story. I never thought I'd be the type to care about gardens or plants or any of that stuff. Growing up, my parents weren't exactly the nurturing type. Not with plants, not with pets, not even with their own kids. Our lawn was always the embarrassment of the neighborhood, overgrown in some spots, dead patches in others. My father's idea of lawn maintenance was getting drunk on a Saturday and haphazardly running the mower before it got too hot. My mother couldn't have cared less. So when I bought my first place, a modest 2-bedroom with a small yard, I wasn't expecting to fall in love with gardening. But something happened that first spring. After the misery of my divorce, after moving out of the home we'd shared, after starting over completely alone at 34, I found myself staring at the sad, neglected rectangle of dirt and patchy grass behind my new house. I was sitting on my back step, nursing a beer, in my wounded pride, when I had this sudden urge to make something beautiful. Maybe it was some desperate need to prove I could nurture something successfully. Maybe it was just wanting to show my ex that I could, in fact, commit to something. Whatever the reason, I went to the garden center the next day. I knew nothing. Absolutely nothing. I must have looked completely lost because an older employee took pity on me. I still remember what she said. "Honey, just start with one small corner. Make that pretty first. Then move on." So that's what I did. What started as one small corner became an obsession. Those first planters, the ones that are now at the center of this whole mess, cost me nearly a month's worth of discretionary income. Premium cedar, custom built by a local craftsman, wallen. But they were worth every penny. I positioned them perfectly to frame my small patio, filled them with rich soil mixed with my own compost. Yes, I became the type of person who composts, and planted a carefully researched selection of perennials and annuals that would provide visual interest year-round. The second year, my garden became my salvation. My mother was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer. While her husband, my stepfather, handled the medical side of things, I became her emotional support. Every other weekend, driving 3 hours each way to sit with her through chemo. Every Tuesday night on the phone as she cried about losing her hair, her energy, her sense of self. When I wasn't working or helping my mother, I was in my garden. I expanded beyond those initial planters. I created a small meditation area under the single mature tree in the yard. I installed a modest water feature that made the most delightful trickling sound. I researched native plants that would attract butterflies and bees. I spent hundreds of hours and thousands of dollars creating my sanctuary. My neighbors noticed. They'd stop by the fence to compliment my work. The older couple next door would bring me cuttings from their own garden. The young family across the street would ask for advice. The garden became my identity in the neighborhood. "Oh, you're the one with the beautiful yard," people would say when meeting me for the first time. And yes, I photographed it obsessively. Every new bloom, every successful transplant, every perfect morning, when the dew made everything glisten. I posted these photos online, partly for my own documentation, partly because I was genuinely proud of what I'd created from nothing. These photos, these personal celebrations of my hard work, would later become evidence against me in the court of public opinion. My mother recovered, thankfully. And as her strength returned, so did my desire to move forward with my life. I'd been in my little house for 3 years by then. It had served its purpose, a safe harbor during the storm of divorce and family illness, but I was ready for something more permanent, something that felt more like a forever home. The housing market in my area had exploded. My modest investment had appreciated considerably, and with my promotion at work, I could finally afford something larger, something with more potential. I found it too. A charming craftsman-style home with a quarter-acre lot. The house needed work, but the bones were good. And that yard, my God, that yard. So much space, so much possibility. I listed my current home and received multiple offers within days. The market was that hot. I accepted an offer well above asking price from a young couple who seemed pleasant enough during the showing. They asked a few standard questions, commented on how beautiful everything was, and submitted their offer that evening. The inspection went smoothly. The appraisal came in right where it needed to be. Everything was proceeding exactly as it should. I allowed myself to get excited, to start planning my new garden, my new life. I even started collecting seed catalogs and sketching out designs for the new space. Then came the knock on my door that would shatter my peaceful transition. It was a Sunday afternoon. I was in the backyard, preparing some of my plants for the move, deciding which ones I could successfully transplant to my new home. I heard the knock, but ignored it initially. I wasn't expecting anyone. When it came again, more insistent this time, I reluctantly pulled off my gardening gloves and made my way to the front door. There they were, the buyers, standing on my porch as if they already owned the place. The woman was clutching a folder of what looked like printouts, and the man had his hands in his pockets, rocking slightly on his heels. They smiled when I opened the door, but something about their expressions immediately put me on edge. "Hi there," the woman chirped, too brightly. "We hope you don't mind us stopping by, but we had some thoughts we wanted to discuss before closing." I was taken aback. In all my research about home buying and selling, every article, every blog post, every piece of advice from my mother and stepfather in real estate had emphasized one crucial rule. Buyers and sellers should never meet directly once the contract is signed. That's what agents are for. That's what the formal process is designed to prevent. These exact kinds of uncomfortable personal encounters. But there they were. And being conflict-averse by nature, another souvenir from my childhood, I invited them in. That was my first mistake. They settled onto my couch without being invited to sit. The woman opened her folder, which I now could see contained printed photos. My photos, of my garden in full bloom, from the previous summer. "We've been admiring your beautiful landscaping," she began, turning the pages slowly, showing me my own photographs. "It's one of the main reasons we fell in love with the house." I nodded, offering a tight smile. "Thank you. It's been a labor of love." The man leaned forward. "That's actually why we're here. We'd love for you to leave all of the garden elements exactly as they are in these photos." "Meaning?" I asked, though I already knew where this was heading. "The planters, of course," the woman said, pointing to a photo of my custom cedar boxes. "And all the perennials. And we were hoping you might be willing to do the spring planting before you leave, to match these photos. We really want the garden to look exactly like this when we move in." I stared at them, momentarily speechless. They wanted me to leave behind thousands of dollars worth of custom planters I had every intention of taking to my new home. And beyond that, they wanted me to spend hundreds more on annual plants and then dedicate hours of labor to installing them for free. "I'm sorry," I said finally, "but the planters weren't included in the sale. They're personal property, like furniture. And, as for the planting, I'm afraid that's not possible. I'll be quite busy with my own move and setting up my new garden." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "We were under the impression that the landscaping was part of the house," the man said, his friendly demeanor evaporating. "Our agent told us that everything we saw in the showing would be included." This was patently false. My listing clearly specified that all planters and container gardens were excluded from the sale. Standard practice. My agent had been explicit about this, and their agent should have communicated it. "I'm sorry if there was a misunderstanding," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "But the contract is clear about what conveys with the house. The built-in fixtures, the appliances we discussed, those all stay. But my planters and container plants come with me." The woman's face hardened. "That's really disappointing to hear. We were counting on having the yard look exactly like these photos." She tapped the printouts again for emphasis. "The yard itself will be in excellent condition," I assured them. "The perennial beds in the ground will remain, of course. The trees, the shrubs, the irrigation system. You'll have a wonderful foundation to work with." They exchanged a look, one of those silent marital communications that spoke volumes. I recognized it from my own failed marriage. It was the look of unified disappointment, of shared strategy. "Here's the thing," the man said, leaning forward again. "The garden was a major selling point for us. A major one. If it's not going to look like these photos, we may need to reconsider the whole deal." And there it was, the threat, subtle but unmistakable. "Are you saying you want to back out of the contract?" I asked, my heart beginning to pound. My own purchase agreement was contingent on this sale. If they pulled out, I could lose my dream home. "We don't want to," the woman said quickly. "But we might have to, if the property isn't going to be delivered as advertised." As I said, there was no false advertising. The listing explicitly excluded the planters and container gardens. My voice was getting tight now, the way it does when I'm trying not to show anger. But what would it really cost you to leave them? The man pressed. They're just plants and some wooden boxes. We're paying a premium for this house. Surely you can throw in a few extras to close the deal smoothly. Just plants and wooden boxes. Just hundreds of hours of research, care, and attention. Just thousands of dollars in materials. Just my passion project, my therapy, my pride and joy for the past 3 years. I'm not willing to leave the planters, I said firmly. And I certainly can't commit to doing all the seasonal planting before closing. I'm sorry, but that's final. The woman closed her folder with a sharp snap. Then we may need to consult our attorney about our options. That's when I felt something shift inside me. All my life, I've been the person who gives in. The child who accepted my parents' emotional neglect without complaint. The spouse who tried to accommodate an unfaithful partner because confrontation was too frightening. The daughter who drove 6 hours round trip every weekend to provide emotional support without ever asking for help in return. But my garden, this creation that had saved me during the darkest periods of my life, this was where I would finally draw the line. Before you speak with your attorney, I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice, you might want to review the purchase agreement, particularly the sections on earnest money and contract cancellation. Their expressions shifted from confidence to uncertainty. The agreement includes a no cancellation clause except under very specific circumstances, none of which include disappointment about planters that were explicitly excluded from the sale. If you attempt to back out now, I can either force the sale to proceed or retain your earnest money and sue for specific performance. The woman's mouth opened slightly. The man's face flushed. My mother and her husband have been in real estate for over 20 years, I continued. I'm well aware of my rights in this transaction, and I'm prepared to enforce them if necessary. You can't be serious, the woman sputtered. Over some garden decorations? They're not decorations to me, I replied. They represent years of work and significant financial investment. And regardless, a contract is a contract. You agreed to purchase this house with a clear understanding of what was included. You don't get to change the terms now because you're disappointed. This is ridiculous, the man said, standing abruptly. The yard is tiny. Do you have any idea how much work it would be for us to recreate this? We're both working full-time jobs. We don't have time to become amateur gardeners. The irony was stunning. They wanted me also working full-time, also in the middle of a major life transition, to do the work for it. For free. $1. The good news, I said, standing as well to signal that this conversation was ending, is that you don't have to recreate anything. The garden beds will be here. The mature plantings will be here. You can choose to maintain them or not. You can choose to add your own planters or not. That's the beauty of home ownership. You get to make it your own. You're being completely unreasonable, the woman said, gathering her things. We just want the house to look like what we thought we were buying. And it will, I assured her. Minus a few personal items that were never included in the sale. The house will be clean, the walls freshly painted, the permanent landscaping intact, exactly as promised. They left in a huff, the man muttering something about contacting our agent as they went. I closed the door behind them and leaned against it, my heart racing, my legs surprisingly weak. I had stood my ground. For once in my life, I had refused to be bullied into giving more than was fair or reasonable. But as I returned to my garden, to the half-packed collection of small plants I planned to take with me, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. I was right. It wasn't over. The next morning, my phone rang. It was my agent, concerned about an email she'd received from the buyer's agent. Apparently, the couple had lodged a formal complaint, claiming I had misrepresented the property and was now changing the terms by removing fixed landscaping elements. My agent assured me that I was in the right, that the exclusion of the planters had been properly documented, and that she would handle the communication. But she also warned me that the buyers seemed determined to make this difficult. Just be prepared, she said. Sometimes people get emotional about these things and look for any leverage they can find. I thanked her and tried to put it out of my mind as I continued my packing. But later that afternoon, as I was wrestling a bookshelf away from the wall, there was another knock at my door. This time, it was my next-door neighbor, the older woman who had often shared plant cuttings with me. Her usually kind face was creased with concern. I heard there might be trouble with your sale, she said without preamble. The young couple came by earlier, introducing themselves to the neighborhood. They mentioned there was some dispute about the garden. My stomach tightened. They were talking to the neighbors now? trying to build some kind of community pressure against me? It's nothing serious, I tried to assure her. Just a misunderstanding about some of my container gardens that I'll be taking with me. She nodded slowly. They seemed quite upset. Said they had fallen in love with your garden just as it is in the summer, and were disappointed to learn you wouldn't be leaving it that way. The garden beds will still be there, I explained. Just not my personal planters and pots. Of course, dear, I understand. But, she hesitated. Would it be so terrible to leave them? As a welcome gift? It would certainly start things off on a better foot. And you'll be building a new garden anyway, won't you? I stared at her. This woman who had been nothing but kind to me for 3 years, now suggesting I surrender thousands of dollars worth of property and labor to appease strangers who were attempting to manipulate and intimidate me. I've already purchased planters for my new home that match the architectural style, I said, which was true. These cedar ones wouldn't fit in at all. I see. I see. She didn't sound convinced. Well, it's your decision, of course. I just hate to see unpleasantness when everyone should be happy about new beginnings. After she left, I received texts from 2 other neighbors, both expressing similar sentiments. Somehow, in the span of a few hours, I had become the villain of the neighborhood. The selfish gardener who wouldn't share. The difficult seller making unreasonable demands. It was my divorce all over again. The subtle social repositioning, the whispers, the taking of sides without full knowledge of the situation. Only this time, instead of mutual friends choosing between me and my ex, it was my neighbors choosing between me and people they had just met. The betrayal stung more than I cared to admit. The final confrontation came 3 days later. I was in the front yard, carefully digging up a few special specimens from the border garden, plants that had particular sentimental value, gifts from friends or divisions from my mother's garden. I was being meticulous, ensuring that the beds would still look full and healthy after removing just a few choice plants. A car pulled up sharply to the curb. The buying couple emerged, along with an older man I didn't recognize. They marched up the front walk with purpose. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" the woman demanded, pointing at the small collection of plants I had set aside in nursery pots. I straightened up slowly, garden trowel still in my hand. "I'm taking a few special plants that have personal significance. The beds will still be." "This is exactly what we were talking about," she interrupted, turning to the older man. "She's systematically dismantling the entire landscape before we take possession." The man stepped forward. "I'm John Miller, president of the Homeowners Association." These folks reached out with concerns about material changes being made to the property between contract and closing. I felt a flush of anger rise from my chest to my face. There is no HOA in this neighborhood. I would never have bought in an HOA community. The man had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. Well, not an official one with covenants. But we do have a neighborhood association that tries to maintain certain standards. And those standards include dictating which personal possessions I can take with me when I move. I asked incredulously. "No, of course not," he conceded. "But there is a concern about maintaining the aesthetics that make our neighborhood desirable." I looked from his uncomfortable face to the smug expressions of the buyers. They thought they had found leverage. They thought bringing in this self-important association president would intimidate me into compliance. Something broke inside me then. Not in a destructive way, but in the way that a fever breaks, a sudden clarity, a release of pressure. "Let me be absolutely clear," I said, setting down my trowel and pulling off my gardening gloves with deliberate slowness. "The contract specifies exactly what conveys with this house. My personal planters and select container plants do not. The permanent landscape beds will remain intact, with the exception of a few plants of personal significance that I am legally entitled to remove." I turned to the buyers. "Your attempt to pressure me through community opinion and vague threats is inappropriate and borders on harassment. If you contact my neighbors about this issue again, or if you appear on my property unannounced one more time, I will instruct my attorney to send you a cease and desist letter." The woman's smug expression faltered. The man beside her shifted uncomfortably. "Furthermore," I continued, "if you persist in threatening to back out of our contract over items that were explicitly excluded from the sale, I will not hesitate to enforce the no cancellation clause and pursue all available legal remedies, including retention of your earnest money and a suit for specific performance." I turned back to the so-called HOA president. "And you, sir, should be very careful about inserting yourself into private real estate transactions. There are laws against interference with contractual relations." I don't know where these words came from. Perhaps from all those hours listening to my mother and stepfather, discuss real estate law over dinner. Perhaps from the quiet strength I had developed while nurturing green things in the face of drought and disease and pests. Wherever they came from, they worked. The three of them retreated, the buyers muttering about difficult people, and the HOA president making vague noises about just trying to help. I watched them drive away, my heart pounding but my resolve stronger than ever. The closing proceeded without further incident. My agent reported that the buyers had attempted to negotiate credit for landscape replacement through their agent, but when reminded of the clear contract terms and the potential consequences of trying to back out, they reluctantly agreed to proceed as planned. I moved out 2 days before the closing, taking with me my precious planters, my carefully potted specimens, and my dignity. I left behind a house that was immaculate, freshly painted walls, professionally cleaned carpets, sparkling windows, and yes, a lovely garden that, while missing a few personal elements, was still far more impressive than any other in the neighborhood. I've been in my new home for 3 weeks now. The cedar planters look beautiful, flanking my new front porch. The special plants from my old garden are settling into their new homes in carefully prepared beds. I've begun the process of transforming another neglected yard into a sanctuary. Yesterday, I received a text from my former next-door neighbor. Apparently, the new owners have already hired a landscaping service to maintain the yard. They haven't planted a single thing themselves. The beautiful perennial beds I left behind are being maintained with all the personal attention of a hotel lobby arrangement. She meant it as a criticism of them, I think. A validation of my decision not to leave my precious planters and perform free labor for people who clearly have no interest in gardening themselves. But all I felt was relief. Relief that my garden, my real garden, the one that exists in my heart and hands, came with me to this new place where it can continue to grow. And at night, when I sit on my new porch surrounded by my beautiful cedar planters, filled with thriving plants that have survived the transition just as I have, I feel a peace I haven't known in years. The peace that comes from standing your ground, from knowing your worth, from refusing to be bullied or shamed into giving more than is fair or right. Some might still call me an asshole for not leaving on a good note, for not sacrificing my time and property to make someone else's transition easier. Those same people would probably never demand such sacrifices from others, would never expect a stranger to give them thousands of dollars in goods and services for free. But here's what I've learned. Sometimes being called an asshole is the price you pay for having boundaries. And sometimes that price is worth every penny. As for me, I'm too busy planning my new garden to worry about the opinions of people who would demand the fruits of my labor, without understanding the roots of my passion. My planters are where they belong. My hands are in new soil. And my heart is finally, fully, at home.